Hi, guys.
Hi,
Welcome back.
everyone.
Today I have Emmy Howard with me, and she's also known as the Birth Wizard. Today we're going to be talking about a very special topic, which we will get into just a little bit later. But let Emmy introduce herself and tell us kind of who she is and where she's from.
So, like she said, I'm Emmy the Birth Wizard. I'm a doula here in Arizona. I specialize in VBACs and gentle cesareans. Um, my mission and want is to bring everyone empowered births, no matter where or how you birth. Um, and this comes from me being a VBAC mom myself 2 times over. And then soon I'll be teaching VBAC and gentle cesarean courses. So really, really into making sure that everyone has information and access to that information.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
really cool, Emmy. So you said that you are a VBAC mom. Can you
I
tell us
am.
a little bit about your story? Like, how did all of this
Oh
begin?
yeah. Yeah. So all of this began because I had my first pregnancy that was super normal and super uneventful. And I went to the normal thing where you just call your OB down the street and you start going and you don't ask any questions. And then at 41 weeks, I got induced and I was a stat, which is I became a part of the cascade of interventions where medicine starts normal everyday medicine is like, hey, let's help out your body. Hey, let's help out your body. Hey, let's help out your body. And ultimately, they didn't help my body out. And I ended up in a cesarean after 72 hours of being on Pitocin. I had an infection, a very yucky, traumatic birth. And it only continued because my son ended up in the NICU and all sorts of things. And I went home and I had the realization of, some people like birth. Like there's some women who have awesome birth stories. What did they know that I don't? Mom, I did. Hey, buddy, can I have you play out there? Yeah, that's actually my cesarean baby right now. Um, and I ended up going home and researching a ton and finding out all about vaginal births after cesareans and what it takes to do that. And it was just this like fire within me where I was like, yes, this is what I wanted. And like reading other women's stories of like, wow, them too, they also had that happen to them. Like it all just finally made sense. So when we got pregnant with my second, I immediately interviewed midwives and ended up down this path. And I've had 2 VBACs, so 2 vaginal births after cesareans, one at a hospital and one at a birth center.
Wow. Now let's talk just a little bit about some of the differences that you noticed. So your VBAC at the hospital, how was that versus, your VBAC at the birthing center?
So there's going to be the obvious difference of one, a hospital versus a birthing center. A hospital setting is a little. I try and be careful. Some people find a lot of comfort in a hospital because there's people there. Someone's an expert in everything. Nothing's going to go wrong, right? However, I feel that can bring more chaos because you have so many more people there that are knowledgeable, that are going to make sure nothing goes wrong. So you have a lot of people coming in and out of your room.
Mhm.
Versus a birth center where essentially it is a bedroom, literally like what you have at home, set up, maybe even a little bit nicer because it was much nicer than what my bedroom looks like, and gives you that zen feeling. Um, and then the midwives are only coming in just to like check on you, but it's really undisturbed.
Mhm.
So those are going to be your major differences between those. For my VBAC in particular, I had a difference of the pain medications that were offered to me. So in the hospital, only epidural was offered. At my birth center, there was nitrous offered, and the tub, and a shower, and like, hey, let's try out this ball, and that kind of thing. So those were the major differences.
Okay, awesome. Now, some people may not know what a VBAC is. So
Yeah,
let's start with the basics.
right, of course.
What is a VBAC?
A VBAC is a vaginal birth after cesarean. So if you've had a cesarean at any point, and you are going to birth vaginally after the fact, some will call your pre to doing that a toe lock, which is a trial of labor after cesarean. So that's before you've even attempted everything. So yeah, that's what it is. Sorry.
You're fine. You're a mom.
Yeah. Here, baby. Can you close the door behind you? Thank you.
Yes, let's normalize motherhood.
Right. Oh,
Mine
yeah.
are still sleeping on the other side of the house. So
Yeah. I have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 9-month-old. So, yeah. Chaos.
yes, and we love it. Okay, so we know what a VBAC is, but why should someone have a VBAC? So why is a VBAC good for you?
Ooh, okay, so I'm going to start that question out with, you should choose the birth that makes you feel most empowered. So just so we get that out of the way, if you choose to do another cesarean, just make sure you have educated reasons and decisions behind that. All right. Now I can jump into why VBAC is a great idea. VBAC is a great idea because it is shown to be less risky than doing a repeat cesarean. There's less chance of any sort of surgical things that you got to heal from, because ultimately a cesarean is major abdominal surgery. They are entering through 9 layers of you to be able to get to baby. For context, that's thicker than a mattress usually. So yeah, so it seems like a little thing. Everyone's like, yeah, no big deal. But it takes you also up to 6 to 10 weeks to heal from a cesarean. Versus a vaginal birth, which can take only 24 hours. So just on like postpartum alone, it's a lot easier. The other reason to go for it is due to I felt that it's a way to recapture your autonomy and how to be your own person. Without it being a surgical thing. It is my body pushing out baby. My mentor put it best of, you know, there's almost a curiosity with women from the very beginning when they learn about babies of like, I wonder if I'll be able to do it. Like, if I'll be able to push that baby out, like if they'll be 8 pounds or 6 pounds, and you'll even like do it subconsciously with your friends of like, how big was your baby? Like, how cool am I? So yeah, there was a big part of me that was like, will I be able to do this? Can I do this? So that's but the biggest thing are risks. You're at a higher risk for bleed out on the table, just to put it very frankly, 3 times more likely than a uterine rupture, which a uterine rupture is when there's a scar or even extra pressure on your uterus due to pregnancy, and it literally pops. So you can get a uterine rupture whether you've had a cesarean or not, but your risks do go up with every cesarean. After one cesarean, though, it's 2%. So they forget to tell you that, you know. So these are reasons.
Okay, those are really good reasons.
Yeah.
As well. So I know that VBACs are not really well received by some medical professionals. Some are okay with them and others are not. How have you been received by the medical community for kind of supporting VBACs?
So I've been very fortunate here in Phoenix, especially we have a really awesome birth community.
Mm-hmm.
And our OBGYNs especially have been getting on board with VBAC. In fact, in our last study of the state, we're down to 22% for repeat cesarean rates, which is almost there with what the WHO World Health Organization suggests. They state it should be anywhere between 10 to 15%. So we're almost there. Like 7% is still a lot, but we're almost there.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a very accepting community. However, um, I have run into those who are not as accepting and those who are not as educated, and that's honestly where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So to give some history on VBACs, back in the 90s everyone was getting a VBAC. Every doctor was like down for it because they're like, do it, but they were using a particular drug to help induce VBACs, which ended up causing more uterine ruptures. And unfortunately, causation versus correlation ended up happening, and they were blaming the VBAC, not the drug. So everyone started to pull back on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that information still exists in our system today. Evidence-based birth talks about in her book, babies aren't pizza.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing that it takes about 15 to 20 years for evidence-based information to make it into hospitals. So we've got another 5 years before they catch up.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a huge army and people now waking up to the fact of like, oh, it was the drug. It wasn't their bodies. Oh, okay, this isn't as risky, because in actuality, if you were to break down the risk of the uterine rupture, you would have a 98% chance of a vaginal birth or a 2% chance of a rupture.
Wow.
So there you go. um, but yeah, I've met some pushback, but for the most part, they're open to learning. I know that's not the case for the rest of the nation, unfortunately, especially in some of our communities where they're disenfranchised and don't have the same resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already come across that where they were pushing one of my clients who was on access to be induced early, because something could happen, and it's like, or we just let her yeah.
Yeah.
uh so the biggest thing I would state, I'm sure everyone on here already knows, hire a doula or do your research, because when you come across those providers and that kind of team, it's going to be easier to stand your ground.
That's awesome advice.
Yeah.
Do your research is like my main message all the
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Please
Yeah.
do your research. So now let's talk about VBACs. Is it possible to have a VBAC if you've had more than one C-section?
Yes, it definitely is. You may have a harder time finding a provider to do it. However, it is very much possible. In fact, I came across a story the other day of a woman after 7 cesareans had a free home birth. So no assistance was there. But yes, it is very much possible. Um, the the biggest thing I would suggest is making sure, like we just stated, that you have your research in hand. Um, that's when you need your doula. That's when you need to turn into the nerd, read all the books. Um, because it is shown there is actually no difference between a mom who's had 1 cesarean and 2 cesareans with their rupture rate. It's once you reach 3 and 4 and 5, that's when you start to get into danger mode. But every cesarean that you subject your body to, you're going to run into more risks. Again, major abdominal surgery. So every time you accept a major abdominal surgery, it's more risky. But yes, it's very much possible. My mentor had a vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. And like I stated, there's that amazing story out there of 7 cesareans and having a vaginal birth. So, yeah.
Wow, that's really good. 7 is, I
Yeah.
can't imagine having to heal from the 1 was too much for me. So 7,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can.
I supposedly they get easier with everyone. I think that's like, it gets easier with every baby because you don't have the discussion anymore with your husband of like what he has to do. He's like, well, she came home. I know what I'm doing. Like,
Right. Well, maybe that was the case for her. At least I hope so. So now we've talked about reasons why it's okay to have VBACs in some cases, but is there a time where you should not have a VBAC?
the time should be where you feel it's not necessary. The time should be that you chose not to have a VBAC. So there's the number one. If you choose it, not a problem. The things that can come into play for planning your VBAC and it does not happen for you. If you have any sort of high risk towards your case, as in preeclampsia, you broke your pelvis before, diabetes, multiple things can put you in that high risk category. They will have to choose if you want to do a trial of labor, which I mentioned earlier, meaning you're induced, you try out labor, see if it ends up resulting in a VBAC, or you end up doing a straight cesarean. But this is really about personal choice and what empowers you. The other thing to keep in mind is how big do you want your family? So, if you're done after this next cesarean, then go for it because there's no extra like risk that will come. But that's what I would state. Making sure it's an empowered choice. There's ways to do that as well throughout your cesarean, like a gentle cesarean. So,
Okay. Can you elaborate just a little bit on a gentle cesarean? What does
of
that look
course, a gentle cesarean is a general term, meaning a family centered cesarean. We'll sometimes hear it called that, or a gentle cesarean. So, different providers, I call it like the secret menu of OBGYNs. You have to ask, and then suddenly, oh, yeah, we totally have animal fries here.
like?
So, essentially, there's different things during a cesarean that you can ask for, like a clear drape. So that way you can see baby enter the world as soon as they enter the world. Not having your arms strapped down is another option that's out there. A lot of times they'll allow you to choose the music that's playing in the OR. Sometimes they'll even push the machines out of the way so that way you're not seeing it. So that like reminder that this is a very like surgical or medical event can go away. If it wasn't COVID, a lot of times you can ask for your doula and your birth photographer to be in there. You can still ask for daddy to cut the cord. There's so many things that they can do. So that way it becomes more about your birth experience and less about it being a surgical event. Cesareans take only 15 minutes to perform. So that's why it's a secret menu because this takes extra time to do these things, right? So asking anyone to do something a little bit slower, you got to ask a little bit more from them. So yeah, they can be beautiful experiences.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just to know that that's a choice. I think one of our local hospitals, I know one of them at least, rolled this out not too long ago because it's
Yeah.
going to be a little bit more baby friendly.
Yeah.
So, definitely ask for the gentle cesarean if possible in your area. Now let's switch gears just a little bit. Tell
Yeah.
me about your favorite birth and why it was your favorite birth.
Oh. And you get this analogy. That's like choosing your favorite child,
Yes.
which is so easy. It's my last one. My favorite birth was my last one. I had learned so much from my previous two births, and I really did achieve what I came to find to be my dream birth. So, my youngest was 41 weeks on the day
Mhm.
when she decided to kick me into labor. Um, and I could tell like contractions were getting up there, that kind of thing. And I was like, I'm going to encourage this because
Mhm.
I usually carry late. So I had a glass of wine, I had my favorite meal, I took a bubble bath, and I went to bed. Go ask your dad. Um, yeah, that's my least favorite birth talking to me right now. Uh, but I went to bed and I woke up at about 2 in the morning. Everyone was asleep, and I couldn't sleep through the contractions. I ended up laboring by myself through most of the night because I had it in my mind. My previous two labors took a long time.
Mhm.
So I knew if I kept my birth team well rested, then they could help me later on. So I told myself, you're not allowed to wake anyone up until 8 a.m. That will give them plenty of time to sleep. You're not supposed to call people before 8 a.m. That was all that Laborland Emmy could think. So I ended up watching like my favorite TV show. I walked around, I took showers. Like it was a very kind of peaceful, meditative time where
Mhm.
I just kind of got to like experience labor and like me welcoming her into this world. Um, but 7 a.m. rolled around and it got to the place where I was like, nope, I need help. Like
Mhm.
we're at that place. So I wake up my husband and he's like, we have to call the doula. We have to call her now because you're way too far for me to like handle you.
Mhm.
Uh, so we called the doula. She was 45 minutes away because that's how far she lives from our house. She arrives and she's like, we have to go like now. Uh, and I arrived to the birth center with her because my husband had to wait for the babysitter to show up.
Mhm.
And we labored. It took me 25 minutes to get from the parking lot into the room. That's how far into labor I was because they were stacked. It took a while. My midwife was making fun of me because at one point I went down to hands and knees so I could like deal with the contractions better.
Mhm.
And she's like, we could take this slow. And I started to crawl my way into the room. I'm like, no, I need in that room because if I get into that room, then we can start like the tub and like everything else.
Mhm.
Um, but I was able to labor only another 2 hours and my baby arrived after my husband had just like made it in a half hour before the end stretch. And we had this like perfect moment of her arriving and they laid her on my chest. And this midwife who was there was the one who initially did the consultation with my second birth and was the first person to tell me like you're a great candidate, you're going to be great for VBAC,
Mhm.
which means she goes, you did it, you did a great job, like this is the birth you wanted. And I like immediately burst into tears because I was like, yeah, it was the birth I wanted. Like,
Oh, that's
yeah,
beautiful. That's so beautiful. And
yeah,
I'm glad that you were able to have that wonderful experience.
yeah.
So now let's kind of give people some advice. So, what are three things that you would tell someone who wants to have a VBAC? How can they prepare for this?
So the number one thing I would say, first off, is join ICANN. It's the International Cesarean Awareness Network. They're local in every state across every country. And those women in there are your warrior sisters, and they will make sure that you're at the correct providers, that you're getting the correct advice, and they'll give you any information you need because they've been in your shoes and they're there for that. Second, figure out what past trauma you have and what mental work you need to do. Because most of this, as much as we've talked about the medical side, is actually up here. From the things you were told, from the fears that you harbor. Once you get through those, this VBAC is going to be super simple. And then lastly, make sure you have a supportive team. So those are my 3 pieces of advice. Because if you have a supportive team, which means your mom or your sister or your aunt or your husband or your partner, whoever it is, and your provider, and you guys are all in the same like wavelength and supportive, you got this. And I say that for all empowered births, right? So that's what I would state. Those are your 3.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emmy, for joining me today. If
Thank
somebody
you.
wants to contact you to learn more about VBACs, how can they do that?
So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, TikTok, all under Birth Wizard. Feel free to message me there. You can also go to my website, birthwizard.com. And then I have helped start up something called the Vbac Academy, where we offer Vbac and Cesarean classes. So that's at vbacacademy.com. So those are 2 places you can find information about me.
Awesome, Emmy. Well, thanks, guys, so much for watching. And thank you again, Emmy, for being here. Bye-bye.